Welcome into another season prediction episode. Today, we're talking about one of the teams with possibly the toughest schedule in the entire country, the Arkansas Razorbacks. They come into this year after going 9-4 a year ago. A real nice step in the right direction for this program, 4-4 in conference play. And I think they're a program that's honestly on the rise. They're recruiting pretty well. They have a very good head coach in Sam Pittman. And I think things are trending in the right direction. So let's see how they're going to do this season. On the offensive side, last year they averaged 31 points per game, 48th in the country. Kendall Browse is back. So I think offensively there's a lot of cohesion there. You also have Jefferson, who was very, very good last year, had that breakout season, completed 67% of his passes, 21 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, and was also a big factor on the ground, 664 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. This was one of the best rushing offenses in the entire country. Last year, they had 4 guys who ran for over 500 yards. So really impressive. They get 3 of those guys back, including Jefferson. The other guys in that group, Raheem Sanders and Dom Johnson. So they'll kind of rely on those two, I think, in the run game along with KJ to try to make sure that this team is very productive running the football. I think if you kind of look at their offensive line, I don't really have any worries. And the reason why I say that is because Sam Pittman, during his career, he's an offensive line guru. And, they get Ricky Stromberg back. They have Brady Latham. They have Bo Limmers. They have guys up front. And I think guys who are developing in the system. And when you have a coach like Sam Pittman, that's massive. And I think that's huge for Arkansas, right? Is the simple fact that I think every single year, as long as Sam Pittman is there, their offensive line is going to be very good and they're going to be able to run the football and play aggressive and physical up front. I think that's just massive. That's a huge advantage in today's day and age of college football. Looking at the wide receiver position, this is an area that I think probably has the most question marks, but I'm really excited to see kind of what their young talent does. They get Jaden Haselwood, who's the Oklahoma transfer. I think it's his time to really emerge. I really liked him coming out of high school, and I do think he can be one of the better players in the SEC at the wide receiver position and probably is going to be their number 1 on the outside. I also really like Ketron Jackson. He's a former 4-star prospect out of the state of Texas. Isaiah Sategna, a great track athlete who I think is going to play early. Just a dynamic freshman who, if you get the ball to him in space, he can make plays and he can also go over the top of the defense with his speed. Malik Hornsby, a quarterback who might move to wide receiver this year. I'm very curious how that transition goes if he does indeed make that move full time. But a very good athlete, one of the better athletes on this Arkansas team. So if they can get something out of him, I think that would be huge as well. Overall, very good offense. I expect them to have a top 35 offense this year. So I do see a little bit of improvement there on the offensive side. Moving on to the defense. Nearly right around 23 points per game is what they allowed, 39th in the country. I think a big area that they need to work on is if you look at their sack numbers, they've had problems in this area for a while. Last year, they had 24 sacks, which was 89th in the country. That's okay. It's very mediocre, far below average. And I think it's an area they need to address and get better at, especially if you want to truly compete in the SEC. They got guys like Zach Williams, Isaiah Nichols, Tarian Carter up front. It's an area that they're kind of rebuilding a little bit. I think, on the interior, they lost John Ridgway, who I think is a phenomenal player and one who meant a lot to that program last year. So there's some adjustments going on up front. And obviously in the SEC, that's not great. When you're having to address the position of the defensive line, you're going to get moved by teams who want to play physical and want to run the football. Arkansas has to address that. I like the pickup of Landon Jackson out of the transfer portal from LSU. Curious if he plays a role. Good news for Arkansas, though, defensively, is Bumper Pool at linebacker, and then Alabama transfer Drew Sanders, former 5-star prospect, also at linebacker. I think those two guys can make up for maybe some of the early mistakes on the defensive line. I think those two are going to be very, very good and very effective. Drew Sanders in particular, keep an eye on him. Very good athlete, very fast. Just got passed up at Bama And that's okay because you're getting passed up by other 5-star guys. I think he's going to be highly productive for Arkansas this next year. If you look in the secondary, transfers, right? So LSU transfer Dwight McGlothern, Georgia transfer Latavius Brini. I think those two guys come in and add to the talent and to the depth of the secondary for Arkansas. I'm curious if they can get it all together on the back end. I do think there will be opportunities to exploit them a little bit at that position. But if these two guys in particular hit, I think Arkansas could be very, very good defensively this next season. So moving on to their schedule, I mentioned at the top, this is one of the toughest schedules in the country. And I mean, it really is. There's no shortage of talent on this schedule, and it's really depth. They're just playing really good teams, it seems, just about every single week of the season. So my wins on this schedule, the ones that I'm circling, I really think for some reason, I have some conviction that Arkansas is going to win this game. Cincy. I know that might surprise people. They made the college football playoff last year. I just don't think Cincinnati physically is going to be able to hold up against Arkansas. I really don't. And I also think Cincinnati's breaking in a new quarterback. I just think Arkansas is going to give them problems. I think they're going to beat South Carolina, Missouri State, Ole Miss, and at Missouri. I think those are going to be wins on their schedule. Lots of home games there. And I think they need to take advantage of those home games if they want an opportunity to hit their over-under number, which is 7.5 wins. So that's 5 wins that I have currently kind of listed going towards Arkansas. I have a loss to Alabama. I don't think they're going to beat Alabama this year. I don't think they're good enough up front on the defensive line to beat Bama this upcoming season. So that means close calls. We're left with 5 of them, and it is loaded. LSU, Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, at BYU, and at Auburn. I mean, that is a gauntlet. That is an absolute gauntlet. And you're telling me that they got to win 3 of those. It's tough, right? Because if you look at it, you go, okay, LSU. How good is LSU going to be this year? I don't know, but they're extremely talented. A&M is very, very talented across the board, especially up front. At Mississippi State, that's just a tricky game when you're talking about Stark Vegas, the kind of offense that they have. At BYU in Provo, it's tough. That's a tough game. BYU's probably a 8-9 win team this next year. And then at Auburn is always tricky as well. For me, though, I'm a believer in the Razorbacks this year. I think Arkansas is going to find a way to win 3 of those games. My best bets on there would probably be at Mississippi State, at BYU, and that LSU game. I think those are games that they can win. I think they'll find a way to win a few of those and get to 8-4. So I'm going to take the over, 7.5 wins for Arkansas. I think 8-4 is the number that I'm going with. I lean more towards that instead of 7-5. I think Arkansas just has this steady presence about them because of their ability to run the football, and they have a returning quarterback in KJ Jefferson, who I actually think is a very, very good one in the SEC. So that's it for Arkansas. High expectations this year from me. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at that schedule and sleeping on them a little bit, but I think the Razorbacks are definitely going to make some noise in the 2022 season. So we will have more predictions later in this week. I'm excited to talk about more of these teams as we get closer to the college football season. But this has been Grayson Grunhafer. Thanks for listening.